Hi Year 9, this is Miss Bartley and today I'll be talking you through your fourth lesson on the Normans. This week we're going to look at why England was such a prosperous country. The first thing that we're going to do is a bit of retrieval practice on medieval medicine. What I'd like you to do is to read the statements and decide if they are true or false. If you think the statement is false, correct the statement. You can now pause the video and spend 1 minute answering those statements on a piece of paper or on the PowerPoint. Okay, let's go through the answers then. Number 1, the sick who were treated at monasteries had a better chance of survival. That is true. Number 2, people in the medieval period mostly believed that disease was caused by germs and bacteria. That is false. People in the medieval period mostly believed in the miasma theory, which is the belief that bad smells in the air cause disease. And they also believed that God was punishing them for their sins. Number 3, wise women wrote books in the medieval period. That is false. Wise women did not write books in the medieval period. It was monks who wrote the books on treating sickness and disease, as they were one of the few people who could read and write. Number 4, Hippocrates developed the theory of opposites. That is false. Galen developed the theory of opposites, which was formed on the basis of Hippocrates' ideas on the theory of the four humours. And then number 5, barber surgeons would practice their surgical skills on the battlefield. That is true. Okay, so we're going to be using these two words a lot in today's lesson, economy and prosperous. We need to define these words in order to understand the basis of today's lesson. I would define economy as the system of trade and industry by which the wealth of a country is made and used. And prosperous can be defined as bringing wealth and success to a country. What I'd like you to do now is to think of some examples that might make a country prosperous. So, if you want to pause the video and spend no more than 1 minute to 2 minutes coming up with several examples, you can do so now. Okay, so here are some of the examples that I've got that might make a country prosperous. So, making good deals to trade with other parts within the country. They can also do this internationally as well. Making alliances with other countries. A good tax system. Making sure that everyone understands their role within society and how they can contribute to it. And of course, making sure that there are plenty of jobs available within that country to make sure that the country is successful and that the economy is booming. So here are our learning outcomes for today. So you're going to be able to understand and explain the differences between the town and village life of Anglo-Saxon England and how they both contributed to the English economy. Okay. So in the 1060s, there were approximately 2 million people in England. 90% of them lived in villages, making a living from farming. Farming enabled the Saxons to be mostly self-sufficient due to being able to live off the land. Now, self-sufficient means that they had no help from anybody outside of their village or on their farms. They mostly did the work or lived for themselves. There was a good climate for farming in the south and east for crops, and in the west for livestock. Livestock is just another word for animals, such as sheep, pigs, chickens and cows. This made England one of the wealthiest countries, as the strong links to farming meant that England was able to trade farming produce all over the country and across the North Sea to Scandinavia and also across to Normandy and Flanders. Now, if you have a look on the map here to your right, we've got Britain or England here, and then Scandinavia is Denmark, Sweden and Norway. They are your typical countries that form Scandinavia. So what would happen here? You'd have towns or villages on the east coast importing all of their goods all the way across the North Sea to these countries in Scandinavia. And then for Normandy and Flanders, you would have towns on different types of ports, such as the ones in Dover, transferring all of their farming produce from Dover to Normandy and Flanders, which is in the north of France here. How advanced was Saxon farming? So the Saxons grew crops of wheat, barley and rye. They also grew peas, cabbages, parsnips, carrots and celery and many other vegetables. These are the typical vegetables that Anglo-Saxon villages and farms would live off. They would be included in their daily diets and used to trade with other parts of the country as well. Farming in Saxon England was very simple. However, they would have to overcome certain problems within farming if they were to maintain their success in contributing to the Saxon economy. What I'd like you to do now is to match up the problems to the solutions that Saxon farmers had to overcome their problems. Okay, so we've got the problems here on the left, and then your solutions are here on the right. So, can you just spend no more than a minute reading through those problems and solutions and matching them up? Okay, so if you want to pause this video and do that task, you can do so now. Okay, so let's go through the problems and solutions. Let's look at this one. Farmers could not grow enough food to keep many of their animals throughout the winter. Now that problem would match up with this solution. So farmers would slaughter their animals in the winter and would have the meat salted to prevent the Saxons from starving in the winter and the meat from going off. Because not much tends to grow during the winter, so they have to store their food accordingly and appropriately to make sure they've got enough to survive on. The second one, England sometimes did not have the appropriate resources to farm on the land, so that would mean they didn't have the proper tools to work on the land, or they didn't have the right metals to grind through the soil properly. So the solution to that is that farmers would use tools imported from Denmark in return for produce such as wool, as Denmark is in the north of the northern hemisphere, so it gets quite cold, and English wool is very notorious for keeping people quite warm. Then the third problem, England suffered from spells of bad weather occasionally. This meant that animals would have died in the cold. Now the solution to that is that houses were constructed on the farms by peasants and the churls and brought them in when the weather was bad. Farmers relied on the animals for work and food, and they couldn't afford to let the animals die. So we're now going to look at how villages and towns were made in Anglo-Saxon England and how they contributed to the Saxon economy. You can see here that these two images are very different. It's clear that if you worked on a Saxon village, you'd work off the land. It's very clear here. It's very open, there's plenty of greenery, there's a fair bit of land for the animals to graze on and for you to work on the land there. And that would provide you with your food and with your shelter as well. So that's just what a typical Saxon village would look like. Here we've got an Anglo-Saxon burh. It appears that it's more fortified here, and it's also very enclosed. So that would offer sufficient protection from any invaders or attackers. So that's just looking at the two differences between a Saxon village and an Anglo-Saxon burh, which was known as the town. So what I'd like you to do now is to work your way through the tasks that you've been set. So we've got number 1, Read the information about the different ways Saxon villages and towns were made. So that's using this information here on this worksheet. Then I want you to explain how they helped the English economy prosper. And then, once you've completed that, I would like you to answer the following question on either a piece of paper or on a separate slide. Which of the following would have contributed more, so given more, to the Saxon economy? A village or a burh? So I want you to spend between 10 to 15 minutes writing your explanations and making sure you've read the evidence properly. And you can now pause this video and have a go at that worksheet for me. Right, we're now going to move on to your fit task for today, in which I would like you to answer the following question. Explain why Anglo-Saxon England became such a prosperous country. For this task, I'd like you to write a minimum of 1 PE paragraph. However, if you want to challenge yourself, you can aim for more PE paragraphs. That's absolutely fine. When writing your answer, I'd like you to use the fragmented words in your writing so that you make sure that you get the key words of this lesson into your fit task. The following words are international trade, protection, prosperous, economy, farming, and burhs. I want you to basically explain what made the Anglo-Saxon economy successful and to give evidence of the different ways that the Saxons made their wealth, despite not having effective or efficient technology like what we've got today to make our economy quite like is booming. Okay? So if you want to pause this video now so that you can spend no more than 10 minutes writing your answer up in the answer box, and then after you've submitted your work, myself and Mrs. Hudson will mark your answers and give you some feedback on it. Okay, for your final task for this lesson, I would like you to answer these questions just to solidify your knowledge and understanding of the Anglo-Saxon economy. If you've got any questions, as always, please feel free to email myself or Mrs. Hudson if there's something that you're not quite sure on. Okay, so if you want to spend about 5 minutes answering those 3 questions, you can do so, and then that is the end of today's lesson. Thank you very much and take care, Year 9.